everybody. I'm Marty Brochstein, Senior Vice President of Industry Relations and Information for Licensing International, the global trade organization for companies in the business of licensing trademarks for usages of all sorts. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of LicensingCon2021 for inviting me to speak to you about global trends in licensing and merchandising. I've been involved in the licensing and merchandising business for about 25 years. Approximately 12 with Licensing International, which was formerly known as Lima. And it remains an extremely dynamic, ever-changing business that's integrated with retail, communications, marketing, product, and social trends that are going on all around us. Today, I'm going to spotlight a few of the patterns and trends that we see affecting the licensing business today, and more importantly, over the next several months and years. But first, I'm going to set the scene by telling you briefly about us. Then I'll talk about the size and scope of the licensing business, and then spend the bulk of my time discussing the trends. So first, a few seconds about us. As you can see, our 1,200 global corporate members represent licensors, retailers, manufacturers, and service providers in creative fields as diverse as entertainment, corporate brands, fashion, sports and esports, digital, art, and collegiate, to name a few, and in product and service categories ranging from apparel, video games, stationery, and toys to restaurants, amusement parks, hotels, and even real estate agencies. As you can also see, we operate globally with our headquarters in New York. Our Korean business currently is handled out of our China operations. So what do we do for these members and for the industry? Among other things, we provide business data and other information. We foster networking opportunities, we provide educational programs, and very importantly, we recognize high achievers, all with the goal of advancing the future of licensing worldwide 365 days a year through an unparalleled network of information and membership, creating impact, growth, and excellence. So as I mentioned, one of the things we do is provide business data. The next few slides will give you a quick look at the size and scope of the business. First, I need to point out that these numbers relate to how the business performed in 2019, as measured in retail sales and other data and other revenue. We normally conduct our annual licensing business survey, as the name implies, annually. The numbers are drawn from that survey. But the onset of the worldwide pandemic so profoundly disrupted business, not to mention the lives of everybody viewing this presentation, that it became apparent that nobody would be benchmarking against 2020 results as they evaluated their own performance. So we have begun the process for measuring 2021 results. Those numbers will be available by the time of Licensing Expo 2021 in May in Las Vegas. So the business has been on a steady growth curve, moving toward the $300 billion mark in retail sales and other revenue, up 4.5% in 2019 to $292.8 billion. Those sales generated $15.8 billion in royalty revenue for the brand owners. The total of royalties generated has been rising at a slightly higher rate than the level of annual retail sales and other revenue for a couple of reasons, relating to the mix of goods being sold and to the growth of such areas as location-based entertainment and other such high-margin categories. The pieces of the global licensing business can be viewed in a few different ways. Here's a breakdown by the type of property. As you can see, the largest portion is the entertainment character segment, which accounts for 44% of the business, or more than $128 billion globally, followed by corporate brands, fashion brands, sports, and publishing-related properties. Those sectors have remained fairly steady over the last several years, though there have been shifts within them. For example, within the entertainment character business, the last few years have seen a rise in licensing related to properties coming from digital media, such things as video games and YouTube-based brands. Now, here's another breakdown by the merchandise categories that are using licensing. My apologies for the small type on this chart, but you can see that the business is spread among a vast number of merchandise categories and sectors. The largest merchandise categories in terms of dollar volume are apparel, 17% of the total, toys, 14%, fashion accessories, another 14%, and software, video games, and apps 9%. Remember, each of these categories is used in conjunction with several kinds of properties. Apparel, for example, covers such things as both a Pokemon t-shirt and Caterpillar branded outerwear. Now here's a geographical breakdown of the global licensing business. The US and Canada remain by far the largest consuming region for licensed goods, accounting for 58% of global retail sales. That number has been steadily dropping over time, not because of a decline in that region, but rather because of steady growth elsewhere in the world. Note that the growth rate of the business in the US and Canada was lower than in 4 other regions that we show here, including Northern Asia, which includes Korea. Korea itself was the 17th largest country in terms of sales of licensed goods and services, generating $1.93 billion. So before I get to the trends that we see affecting the licensing business, I want to take a brief moment to get down to the essence of what licensing is. We'll leave the legal definitions out of this, though it's a highly legalistic business. Here's a business definition. Licensing is one of the most powerful contemporary forms of marketing and brand extension. Whether you're a film producer looking to licensing as both a revenue producer, but also a marketing tool to maximize the awareness of your film, or if you're a brand owner who's looking to expand into new categories without manufacturing yourself, if you're an animator with a great new character set and story, a manufacturer who is seeking licensed properties to boost his or her business, licensing can be a great tool to achieve your goals. And one even more basic point, it's all about emotion. A character, a television show, a sports logo, a brand, none of them is worth licensing unless they generate some sort of emotion in a target audience. It might be humor, it might be nostalgia, it might be, I've been a Manchester United fan since I was a little girl. A corporate brand can evoke trust, that's also an emotion. But it's all about answering that question. Why should a consumer care about this brand or character? That's what will determine the value of the property that you own or represent, or if you're a potential licensee, the amount that you're willing to pay in order to share in the equity of that property. Let's turn now to some trends that we believe are shaping the future of the licensing business. Some are broad social and societal movements, some relate to communications, and some are specific to the licensing business itself. This phrase has become a cliche over the past year, but wherever you're doing business, a key element of success will be to figure out how the various facets of the business have changed. How is the cost and time needed for content production different than it was before the pandemic hit? You can ask the same question about the factories that make licensed products. If you're in sports licensing, are stadiums and arenas open? Are they allowed to be at full capacity? The same question for cinemas. What does retail look like? Are malls open? Are people going to them to buy? Is e-commerce still growing as fast as it has been during the pandemic? Whatever part of the licensing business you're in, think about what has changed and what the implications are for what you're trying to achieve. These issues will impact all of the trends I'm addressing here. From its earliest days, the entertainment licensing business has always grown out of the mass communications of that era. The earliest licensing opportunities were from books and comic strips. Then came radio stars, then films and TV programs. The 80s and 90s began to see licensing built on the earliest video game characters, beginning with such immortals as Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. In the current marketplace, digitally based licensing programs built on an ever-expanding array of video game characters and titles is blossoming, in some cases after those properties have been extended into theatrical films or TV series. Games that are created on the growing platform Roblox, which allows kids and others to build their own, are beginning to spawn their own licensing programs. Also springing from the digital world, celebrity influencers using their social media platforms to become brands unto themselves, developing merchandise lines and direct-to-consumer business models. And speaking of platforms, the rise of streaming platforms is reshaping both the world of entertainment production. After all, the platforms all need content. and the licensing business, which is learning how to function in a universe in which the platform companies only selectively release the kind of viewership data that helps potential licensees and retailers decide whether or not to back specific shows. It also runs counter to the long-established rhythm of theatrical film licensing, when the crescendo of marketing builds to the release of the film, and fans stream to the theater to see it in the first couple of weeks. But films and series live on a streaming platform for a long time, so it's impossible to know when consumers will actually watch and, important to the licensing community, develop the kind of emotional attachment to a story or character that, as we've discussed, is vital to merchandise sales. The story of how streamers and licensing executives adjust to each other's needs is still being written. Licensed properties also are a staple of theme parks around the world. A couple of recent examples. In Japan, the Seibu-en amusement park in May launched the first permanent Godzilla-themed dark ride. That's a self-contained ride, as part of Legendary Entertainment's move to further license out its portfolio. Last month, Six Flags Entertainment's Magic Mountain in California announced plans for a Wonder Woman Flight of Courage in 2022 that's being called the world's longest and tallest single-rail roller coaster in the park's DC Universe area. And of course, Wonder Woman is part of the DC universe of characters. But it's not just about theme parks, and it's not just about properties from the entertainment business. Brands have been increasingly active in this space. Hasbro and its licensee opened the first Nerf Action Experience Family Entertainment Center in Singapore in 2019, based on its iconic foam substance. With expansion of the concept set for other markets as they become practical in a post-pandemic world. Crayola also has internally developed a series of Crayola Experience Children's Creativity Centers over the past few years, and now plans to license the concept out. As developers of malls and shopping areas look to give consumers reasons to come out and shop, they're increasingly looking for activity and entertainment concepts that can't be replicated online. It's an opportunity for brand owners of all sorts to play a part in turning these shopping destinations into experiential destinations. One of the biggest challenges for licensees and retailers is the velocity with which properties burst into prominence, as well as uncertainty about how long they'll last. For both of them, it's a matter of fitting fast-moving trends into a structure built on sound business practices and planning, and in the case of manufactured products, the sheer time it takes to design, get approvals on, manufacture, and distribute the products. Comparing two big entertainment properties gives an indication of how things have changed in just a few short years. Near the end of 2013 in the US, Disney unveiled a little film called Frozen. There wasn't much of a licensing program in place, but very quickly and very unexpectedly, the film became hotter than hot. Retailers were calling up their suppliers saying, "Get me Frozen merchandise." But there was virtually nothing since Disney hadn't really pushed it. Disney spent the next year and a half trying to catch up to demand. Needless to say, the same thing didn't happen with Frozen 2. Now, go back only a couple of months when Netflix launched something else you may have heard of called Squid Game. Again, it burst on the scene unexpectedly, the product of Netflix's effort to boost its non-US programming, in this case, Korean programming. While it will take some time for figural products to get to market, Netflix was able to have print-on-demand shirts and hoodies on its own Netflix shop as soon as the demand became apparent. We'll come back to that point in a minute or so. The growth of print-on-demand is due to factors other than just getting to market quickly, and it's becoming important well outside the Squid Games and Frozens of this world. POD also allows for more experimentation in doing business that appeals to smaller but still significant audiences. American artist-designer Deborah Valencia says that print-on-demand allows you to focus on niche audiences that might not be a good fit for traditional licensing, which needs to be more mass-oriented. And it gives an artist a chance to experiment with looks that may not be aimed at his or her traditional target consumers. It isn't taking away from traditional art licensing, she says, because people still want to go to stores and see the selection, but it has become a great way to test out new designs. And a licensee who has built his business on print on demand, Ty Simpson of a company called Merchmake, says that the modern social media influencer is well attuned to this business. Everybody is building their own brand now, and everyone is a brand owner. It's a younger group that is taking on these production platforms and just running with it. They're finding their own audiences and niches. It's almost brand building itself. Most people think of print on demand as a business that's all about t-shirts, hoodies, mats, and hats and mugs. But advances in printing technologies, among other factors, have helped broaden POD to many other categories, particularly increasingly for home goods areas. It's increasingly becoming important for licensees who are competing for licenses to have both a POD strategy and one for e-commerce, systems in place to create and ship small runs of merchandise to small retail accounts, or even single pieces directly to consumers. The online universe has turned everyone into sellers. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and many, many others that may have been thought of initially for their social or informational value are now direct channels for commerce. What's more, brand owners and their licensees are opening their own online storefronts. Perhaps more important than the revenue those storefronts generate is the fact that they constitute a direct connection to fans and purchasers, letting them accumulate the kind of data that is a building block to further developing their businesses. One last trend I'll spotlight. Sustainability has become a central part of the licensing conversation on so many levels. It's apparent that it's become at least an element of children's programming around the world, if not a central theme in some cases. So what's seen on the screen gets translated into the real world. Just one example, the UK supermarket chain Waitrose earlier this year stopped selling children's magazines that are packaged with disposable plastic toys, a significant license business, amid calls from children to stop the practice. Overall, 58% of US children surveyed weighed sustainability in making their buying decisions, followed by China, 55% of kids, Australia, 52%, and Mexico and Brazil, 45% each, according to the Insights family, a UK-based research firm. But it's not just about kids and entertainment. Fashion brands who are trying to appeal to those in their teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s are creating messaging and practices related to lessening the environmental impact of their manufacturing and shipping, and promoting reuse and recycling of their apparel. And think of multinational giant Coca-Cola. Its head of licensing, Kate Dwyer, told us earlier this year that during the past year, consumers have been increasingly willing to pay the 5 to 10% price premium, down from 20 to 30% a decade ago, that sustainable products typically demand. Quote, there has been a pivot in the last 6 to 12 months because consumers not only say they want it, meaning sustainability, but they also are actually willing to pay the difference, she said. Coke is aiming to make its own packaging 100% recyclable by 2025, up from the current 90%, and use 50% recycled materials in its packaging by 2030. But here's also the licensing story. On the licensing side, by 2025, all licensees' packaging will be required contractually to have 20% recycled materials. Those materials must be traceable through the supply chain, Dwyer said, offering a detailed list of goals established for licensee packaging. And by the way, it's not just the brand owners and manufacturers driving the process. Major retailers are setting their own standards. So those are just a few of the business trends that we see affecting the licensing business in the months and years to come. We hope you have a great conference and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, everybody.